Hello, and welcome back to the Cavalier's Tale. I'd forgotten where we are now. It's been a while, hasn't it? So it's that time of the year again when I do videos, and when I do videos, that means it's generally update time. So we're going to be taking a quick look at the Rulebook and the Arcane Compendium, and then we're going to move on and you look at the KoE book. I would do others, but I think there are other people who are also doing videos, and they're going to be better suited to talk about those things than I am. And I don't want to spend days on this, I suppose. I want to do the most interesting stuff and then move on, I guess. So let's get right into it. So, Rulebook and Arcane Compendium first. Let's hope I've got these layers the right way around. Look at that, professional. So, the big thing for the Rulebook here, there are, as is customary, there are bits and pieces that have to be reworded and rechanged and kind of shuffled around, and things clarified to make sure that the rule set's all happening, as we want it to be. So, that's what that final point there at the bottom is, various rules clarifications. One particular thing that I spotted was blocked path will now apply to the board edge. So if a single model moves up and then points itself enough towards the board edge that you can't actually charge it, but you're still only in its front arc, and therefore you can't charge, blocked path will now apply, so you can now do reforms to force you to be able to charge. So fewer single models shenanigans with your nonsense in your board edges, you naughty lot. Next up is, I think, 11, count them, 11 new special rules added to the rulebook. These are general rules that have appeared in multiple army books, not necessarily just labs, but the slim books as well, that have been compiled, reworded so that it's all streamlined and then added to the rulebook so that we've got one place to look at it and it all makes sense. And rather than messing around with having it slightly worded differently for one book and slightly differently for another. So we're going to run them through quickly here rather than me reading through them. That just seems better. I don't want to be reading rules for it. I don't want to be reading Hidden to you. If you know what Hidden is, and if you go and have a look at Hidden, it's too long for me to be reading to you. So first one is attached. The model has to be joined to a unit, and it can't leave that unit. Nice and easy. So that's things like Born into Battle, and probably other things. I think like the Hobgoblin character, the Savaran, the Hob Savaran can't leave units and all that kind of thing. So that's what that's for. Deafening Clangor, so that's for the Whispering Bell and Ogre Khan Giants, and the Very Earth Trembles, I think, the Saurian Ancients rule for the Titanopod. That's just that's in the rulebook now. So 18-inch march tests, and it counts as a musician. Next one is Hidden, as I mentioned, so that's for things like Vermin Swarm and Red Elf Assassins. They pop out of units by killing a rank and file, and then they can't leave that unit, and if you turn up after turn 4, then you count as a casualty. All that kind of jazz. But now it's all worded as one thing, and it's in the rulebook, which is great. Hold the Line has been put in here, which is Obsidian Guard, I think. Yes, that's Obsidian Guard, and Greybeards from the Dwarven Holes book. So it's not just labs that have had new funky things added to the rulebook, it's also the slim books. Exclusive, so this is replacing the old Solitary that the Infernal Dwarves and Red Elf book had, with particular mounts that didn't have towering presence but also couldn't join units. So this has been expanded upon a little bit, where it's got a brackets with an X. So if it's exclusive to rank and file model, for example, the unit, exclusive to, so again, this leans into things like attached with Born into Battle, where, if you have a Whispering Bell, that can only be deployed in Vermin Legionnaires or Black Fur Veterans. That's what this rule is now. So you get exclusive Vermin Legionnaires and Black Fur Veterans, which is cool, nice and easy. It's in the rulebook, much nicer than it used to be. And that can apply to special rules as well. So Unstable and Unbreakable have been reworded a little bit to make the most of that rule as well. Special Ambush is technically a bit of a new one. So this is things like Briar Beasts and Underground Ambush and the Fey Knight from Kingdom of Equitaine. It's been replaced with this. It's basically the same as it used to be, so you have to be touching the thing, but you can be deployed within 6 inches of that thing, almost. So like, there's a couple of steps to it. But yeah, that's where that has gone now. Extra support, so things like Master of Battle for Warriors of the Dark Gods Chosen. Certain swarms would get to do extra attacks. KoE and Lance formation get to do 2 attacks if they're standard size. Now it's just extra support, brackets, and then the number of supporting attacks that model can make. And it's now in the rulebook. Rage, we know what Rage is, so Giants, when they lose hit points, they gain extra attacks. Hydras, when they lose hit points, they gain extra attacks to represent their heads growing. Again, that appears across loads of different rulebook army books, so into the rulebook it goes. Shooting extra rank is finally a rule, rather than just, you know, the unit may shoot from an additional rank. This is generally the 3rd rank. That's just, you know, now it's just shooting extra rank, which I think is more or less, well, it's exactly what it, you know, what it says in the design notes there. What it says, really. That's what that is. Steady aim, just ignore the standard shoot penalty. Again, another thing from the Dwarf book, but the Empire have a banner that grants this as well, I think. And then immune, so this is something that KoE has. That's for the Black Knight's Tabard, where it's immune to multiple wounds. And the Saurian Ancients Starfall Shard, I think you're immune to flaming attacks, aren't you? I believe that's what that is. Oh, I've got the border things the wrong way around. Oh no, let me fix that. There we go. Not quite as professional as I'd hoped. So that's everything from the rulebook. You know, as I said, there are more clarifications in there, bits of rewording, so go through and have a look through. But the exciting bit is those 11 new special rules that aren't really new, they just have better names and are in the rulebook and aren't going to be cluttering our army books anymore. So next up, we're going to take a look at the Arcane Compendium. So let's take a look at the changelog, shall we? So lots of stuff has changed. We're going to go and have a look through that specifically. Do you want to do points? And yeah, let's do points now. So Binding Scroll has gone up 10 points, which is fair. It's very popular in the European meta, particularly. Us Brits generally don't use it. I don't know what it's like in the US at all. I don't pay much attention to their tournaments, or as much as I do to the European ones, I suppose. Or at least it's not talked about as much as at European. Anyway, that's gone up 10 points because people like them. You know, us in the UK are weird. Lightning Van Braces, everyone got very excited about this when it changed from 2d6 strength 3 hits to Hand of Heaven, so they all used it for like a tournament or two, and then it's the weaker version of Hand of Heaven, so that's not been used since, and that's gone down 10 points, so it's only 20 points for that now, which is really nice. Cleansing Light has doubled in price. That's weird. Why has Cleansing Light doubled in price? We'll take a look at that in a moment. Eldritch Inscriptions. But Wes, it's not Eldritch Inscriptions, it's Blessed Inscriptions. And also, why has it gone down 25 points? Ah, we'll get to that in a moment as well. Book of Arcane Mastery has gone down 25 points. And again, why has that gone down 25 points? Book of Arcane Mastery is very good. Ah, we'll get to that in a moment as well. Spellcasting values, Word of Iron's gone up 1. Silver Spike has gone down 1. No, I don't see an awful lot of alchemy, to be fair, so whatever. Truth of Time has actually changed, so we'll take a look at that in a moment. But it's gotten up 1 in its casting value, which is nice considering duality for cosmology. Mirror of the Veil. What on earth is Mirror of the Veil? We'll get to that in a moment as well. Totemic Summon has gone down 1. Why has that got down? We'll get to that in a moment. Deceptive Glamour has gone up, so its small value has gone up to 5, and its big value, its boosted value has gone up to 8. I think that must mean it's so the boosted version of Word of Iron and the boosted version of Silver Spike have gone up and down respectively, and that's why Mirror of the Veil suddenly has 2 casting values as well. We're learning here. The Wheel's Turns has gone down actually. Sorry. So Wheel Turns, the base version has gone down to 6, and the boosted version has gone down from 10 down to 8. And again, why has that gone up and down? That's because it's changed. We're going to go and have a look at that in a moment. So let's take a look from the start, shall we? Scroll. Okay, yeah, so the boosted version of Word of Iron has gone up. The boosted version of Silver Spike has gone down. Cosmology, Truth of Time has changed, so instead of all this faff about, how does multiple instances of, maximized and minimized all work, it's all nice and simple now. Now it's an agility buff and an advance rate buff, or debuff, depending on whether you're casting the Chaos or the Cosmos version, which is nice and easy, and that's cool, and that's gone up a little bit in the casting value because that's a little bit more useful, and if you combine it with Altered Sight, then you get a little bit of a truth know thine enemy, which is cool. Another agility buff is great, especially, elves like that, especially if you can debuff something that's going to hit you first. Unity and Divergence, is that Chaos or Cosmos? The Chaos aspect of Unity and Divergence has changed. Instead of every model in the unit takes a hit, it's now 6x6. So in the most cases, that's going to be everything in the unit. But if you're in Horde formation, if you're 24 models, now, 3 lots of 8, now it's only going to be 3 lots of 6 instead. So that's nice for them. And it makes it less punishing for like the gigantic units of Vermin Swarm, which is probably fine rather than just like obliterating them. Like, we're not playing 8th edition, we're playing something sensible. We're playing 9th Age. We're going to have sensible spells. So that's why that's changed. Divination. So this is where the Mirror of the Veil comes in. No longer do we need to work out, what on earth this does and then decide actually Unerring Strike is better. Now we can have a look at the target gains magic resistance 3 that is also applied to friendly spells. So this is less useful for general armies, like for KoE for example, because you're spending generally quite a few dice to just make your opponent also use dice. So maybe it's something to do, or at the very least, change their target in their magic phase. But particularly, this is good for demons because demons don't have any magic resistance. They don't get access to Crystal Ball or Binding Scrolls or anything like that. So this is actually quite exciting for them, and it makes that spell quite interesting, rather than just I really liked Portent of Doom. It's really useful against like some kinds of list, but that's as KoE where I don't bring my combat res, so I can kind of bring a stat bonus almost in the shape of a magic spell on your characters, which is nice, but it's less good for like other armies. So this is nicer. It's a lot simpler to play, and it's useful for demons. So that's cool. Druidism. So this is a big one, isn't it? This has been completely wiped and then rewritten from the ground up. A couple of things have stayed in, like Entwining Roots I think is almost identical, but there's no more Oaken Throne. Rejoice! So let's start with Ley Lines. So this is like an in-betweeny rule. It's not quite an attribute. It's like one of the, I guess the sacrifice? I don't know. Either way, it's called Ley Lines. Instead of measuring the range of Druidism spells from the caster as normal, it can be measured from any forest, water, or hill terrain feature on the battlefield. If so, the range is set to 6 inches. So that creates, generally, a pretty massive coverage over the field. Maybe less so on certain tournament boards, when you go to an in-person tournament, just because of the nature of in-person real terrain at tournaments. But certainly in what are they called? The map pack maps, you're generally going to get an awful lot of coverage because, of course, it's not just 6 inches away from the terrain, it's also from the terrain itself. So that's very exciting. That's for all your spells as well. So Stone Skin, Summer's Growth, Master of Earth, Healing Waters, Entwining Roots, Fountain of Youth, Hidden Paths, it all counts as casting from that. So that makes it a lot easier to protect a Druidism Master if you want to keep them further back. And if you want to get them more involved as well, they're not stuck to that little bit where they've gotten themselves involved or anything. They can reach out to everywhere else. And that also becomes a lot simpler because the old Druidism, Master of Earth was cast from Impassable, Stone Skin was cast from hills, Entwining Roots was cast from forests, Healing Waters was from water terrain. Now it's just forest, water, and hill. Nice and easy. So the attribute, the target gains Strider. this is really good for you know, your big blocks of infantry, because you can stay steadfast in forests and water and all that kind of thing, and you can walk through the water with your stuff on foot. If you're beast herds and you've got your big units of chariots or your big units of character chariots, but you've got to charge over a wall to get to something, that's really, really good for them. You know, this is, you know, for KoE it's fantastic as well, because cavalry really doesn't like terrain generally, especially very expensive, very long, very unwieldy lances that the KoE use. Fountain of Youth, so this is the one of 2 healing spells that we've got now. This one is basically the attribute, but it's actually as a spell now, so it's exactly the same as it used to be, with the raises 1 hit point, no character or model, no character or model with Towering Presence or both can raise more than 1 health point from this spell per phase. Or you can cast it as a boosted version that then gains focused, so now you can pick out characters in units with the boosted version, gain D3 hit points. So you get focused, you get the D3, so you can focus on like a model inside a unit, but if you're doing that, then it's most likely a character. So they would only gain the 1 hit point, but you do get the focused for it. And that's for a casting value of a 5 and a 7, so I think that's really good. And also, you know, I mistook this, but the target or its unit raises D3, so you can cast it just as a boosted version on a unit and raise D3, so that's really very good. It's not great for monsters, but like it's no worse than it was for monsters initially, like, because you'd be casting Entwining Roots on like something to get the health attribute anyway, and you get the same number of hit points, and you can do it the same number of times, so it's a little bit worse, it's a little bit better. Yeah. Entwining Roots, so this is exactly the same as it used to be with different casting values, 5 and 8, so like, you know, that's basically the same, but the boosted version used to have to cast Oaken Throne first, so the casting value for the boosted version has gone up a little bit, which is fine. Healing Waters, I think, is the same as the non-Oaken Throne version, and you essentially get the non-Oaken Throne version on a unit without Fortitude anyway. You get 6+, +1, so that's a 5+ on any unit, and if you manage to cast it somehow on trolls, for example, they'd get their 4-up Fortitude plus the +1 to make it max 3. So the better example is like Death Cheater or Argor's Infliction for beast herds. So that's pretty cool. Obviously it's very hard countered by flaming attacks, so, you know, not necessarily unkillable Death Stars or unkillable cowboys we're making with this, but it's quite nice. Master of Earth, so this has got a very, very short range of 6 inches, but it's only damage hex, so you can cast it out of combat. You can't cast it into combat, but you can cast it out of combat to basically anywhere on the board because of ley lines. And you also don't need to be looking at your target, like you don't need line of sight, and it doesn't need to be in your front arc, which is very nice. And it's also now 2d6 hits instead of the 1d6 hits. The number of times where I've needed, you know, to get Master of Earth off to try and kill that little bit of chaff that's going to cause me problems next turn if I don't kill it, and I manage to get it off, and then I roll a 1 for the number of hits. You can still roll a double 1, but now it is far less likely. And at the very least, if you are rolling your minimum, it is double the minimum of the old spell, so that's nice. Stone Skin is a big change, so instead of the resilience shenanigans that it used to be, it's now melee attacks against the target can never wound them better than a 5+. So if you know Scarification from Shamanism, it's that. It is exactly that. Which is really, really nice for low-res units, and it's a little bit more harsh for high-res units, but I think just throwing 6s at a model and hoping for the best isn't great for anybody in the game, so I think this is a nice change. And generally Druidism is really, really good in like particular matchups and not so great in others, so, and I think Stone Skin was part of that, so I think this is a good change. Whether or not the casting value is too high, I don't know. It's the same as the non-Oaken Throne version, or maybe the Oaken... It's more or less the same as it used to be, but without the benefit of being able to use it outside of combat. But also, it's really good for... It stayed really, really, really good for low-res units, which, you know, generally are tar pits, so who knows? Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But also, it's gained extra range, hasn't it? Because it's now 18 inches, and also 6 inches from forest, water, and hills, so who knows? Summer's Growth is an interesting one. So this is a 6-inch... Well, It's a ground spell with range of 12 inches, and then for any units within 6 inches of the target point, raise D3 health points. Characters and or models with Towering Presence raise 1 health point instead. So if you get into a big, clusterfeth of a combat in the center of the board, then you can cast in the center of like all that mess up with 4 of your units in range, and then raise D3 hit points on all of those, which is really good. It's not targeted, so you can't heal characters inside of units, which is fine because there is a focused one earlier on in the lore. But I think this is really cool. I think this is nicer than it used to be as well, just because it's more interesting and it rewards you kind of not just 5 dicing one where you need it. I don't know whether that's quite so much of a thing that people did, but I think this is a more dynamic spell now. I think it makes it a little bit more interesting. It's certainly a lot more tricksy with how ley lines work and how creative you can be to get units within a 12-inch bubble of one another, from that 6-inch. So, I think this is more interesting, basically. Whether or not it's as good, I don't know. It's certainly not as useful for, units like infantry units where you could grow back 6 guys, but also you don't also have to cast Oaken Throne and everything, and so I think it's cool. I don't know whether it's better or not, but it's certainly cool. So we'll see how it gets on over the next couple of months. Evocation, Spectral Blades, and Ancestral Aid have switched around. Gone are the days where you're going to be taking a Evocation Apprentice just to 5 dice Spectral Blades occasionally and win the game. So this is very sensible because that's definitely an adept level spell with how good it is. No casting value change though. Occultism hasn't been. Oh no. So forgive me. I don't know occultism otherwise. So the range has changed here, and if the target is within 12 inches of the caster, then that changes as well. So I don't know whether that's probably a nerf, but that's probably because this is really good. But also I don't know. Yeah, that's a change. I don't know how it's changed, but it has changed. Pyromancy has a new spell. Enveloping Embers has gone the way of the Chaos version of Unity and Divergence, so 6x6 area attack instead. What was the one that's gone? I don't know. One of the, all Pyromancy spells are the same. One of them is gone, and now melee and ranged attacks, if you cast the boosted version, against the target suffer -1 to wound, which is really nice and makes this a little bit more of an interesting and flexible lore now. So you can take an adept with 2 buffs instead of having to be stuck with a useless strength 4 AP nothing if you're playing against armor. So this is cool. This is fun. This makes it more interesting. That's good. Shamanism. Oh, that's cool. So I guess previously you could do an overrun and that wouldn't count for cancelling over a swarm of insects. So that's been fixed, I guess, now. And then the big one here is that the Totemic Summon has lost its breath attack, and that is why it's gone down slightly in points. I guess the big version has stayed up because if you get nice and close to the board edge, then you can be chaffed by magic, which is really good still, regardless of the breath weapon. So that's why that's changed. I think that's fair. I think that's cool. Thaumaturgy, clarification for Hand of Heaven. Speaking in Tongues has changed again? I don't know. Maybe it hasn't changed again. Maybe I'm just remembering because I've seen this for a long time. Either way, now you cast it on a unit, and then the unit takes a discipline check. If it passes it, it gains Fearless, which is cool because you can cast it on a unit that might be trying to flee or wanting to flee. And if the test is failed, then the target becomes shaken, which is also really cool because then they can't charge or shoot or do particularly an awful lot of movement, I think. So that's quite funky. Whether or not you're going to pick it still over the rest of the lore, I don't know, but there we go. There's a change. Thaumaturgy is still really good, so not massive. Wrath of God has been changed a little bit. It's kind of like it's not really much less effective than it used to be. It's just now you don't need to keep stacking counters on it, but also you don't get the extra range from those stacked counters. It's just a much easier spell to manage now. And it has technically, because you don't get the extra range if you cast it and then it comes down really late. You don't get the extra range from it, but it's just if all the units that you get hit will still take the same number of hits of Strength 5 AP2. So it's still really good. And then Witchcraft. So Witchcraft has taken a little bit of a change. There's no more sweeping attack from Ravenswing. No more dancing over something to take its final hit point with a random Ravenswing. And also, you can't Ravenswing onto an objective anymore. That's very sensible. You lose scoring until the start of the next friendly magic phase. So you can't magic onto an objective at the top of turn 6 or the end of turn 6 or anything like that, because you will lose scoring by doing so. So you'd drop objectives. You wouldn't be scoring in time for hold the ground, all that kind of thing, which is that's fair. Ravenswing is also really good. Deceptive Glamour, as I've said, those have changed, and the mess that wheels turn, it's like, it's very good. I've no idea how to work it though. Every time I'd cast or have this spell cast on me, I'd have to go back and double check exactly how it's worded and which models are affected and stuff. It's very simple now. Melee attacks against the target always either hit or wound on a 4+, and that's dependent on whether or not you cast the base version or the boosted version, and that's always as well. So you can't, Dread Elves aren't going to be able to cast it on you and then get +1 to either of those, or on themselves or the enemy, or whichever way it works. It's set on a 4+, it's just always a 4+, which is nice. That's nice and simple, and it's also just one line of stuff now, rather than the thing that it was before, and it's basically the same effect, so that's all cool. And that is the end of the magic paths. So, magic equipment next. Added to the magical weapons, or the weapon enchantments more specifically, attacks made with an enchanted weapon becomes magical attacks, because every single magic weapon in the game would have a little clause saying, oh, by the way, you get magical attacks for this, which we all know it's just been shifted out and stuck in the special item category rules instead, which is good. Actual change to the magic items. So, Eldritch Inscriptions. It is now Eldritch Inscriptions because it is no longer blessed. And it is no longer blessed because it has lost its divine attacks, which is good, because we don't need, big boosted, really super duper awesome blessed inscription type enchantments that just screw with developing new labs and stuff. So that's cool. That makes it a little bit cheaper. It's basically still as good as it used to be, because divine attacks were basically like a little extra peppering of, oh yeah, that's awesome. The reroll to wound is the really, really good bit. So maybe it's also too cheap now still, but that's cool. So where have those divine attacks gone? It's gone straight into Cleansing Light, which is why Cleansing Light has doubled in price. Do note though, it's still the turn on and off. So, but because of the change to magic weapons now, you always have magical attacks, and when you turn on Cleansing Light, you get both divine attacks and flaming attacks at the same time. So you can't fight a character with, say, Talisman of Shielding and Basalt Infusion, and then turn on your divine attacks to get past that without also activating the Basalt Infusion. So that's cool, that's interesting, that's funky. Yeah, and I think Cleansing Light, that just makes it more interesting, because I've taken it before, but I think that's because I had an extra 15 points. No changes to armor equipment at all. No change to banners, apart from the fact that Rending Banner has been kicked out. So that's gone, just because there were several units with either AP0 or AP1 that would always take them. So Temple Militants and Questing Knights were a good example. Things like Disciples of Lugar causes problems for the lab teams trying to design the unit to be niche, and then and then the player base sticking a banner on it to make it not niche. That makes it difficult to price that. It makes it difficult to balance that properly. So that's why the Rending Banner is now gone. And I think that's a good thing for the game. Binding Scroll, as I've said, has gone up 10 points. Book of Arcane Mastery has been completely scrapped and then rewritten, because again, kind of makes it difficult to make, particularly it makes Master and Adept really good. So this change makes that less of not necessarily an auto take, but it makes it less of a really, really good build of Magic Phase, and it tries to diversify that, like how we had last year with the Magic prices for Adepts, Masters, and Apprentices all changing. So now, unless the bearer has Is it Protean magic or Protein magic? I don't know. Either way, as long as you don't have that, it knows one additional spell from its learned path between spells 1 and 4. So if it's an apprentice, then you get spell 1 and you get either 2, 3, or 4. And if you're an apprentice, then you get to pick 3 spells out of 1, 2, 3, and 4. In addition, the bearer cannot cast the hereditary spell, so you can't just take an adept and then buy the Book of Arcane Mastery and Magical Heirloom and take 4 spells, and you can't take, and you can't also get the hereditary twice if you have a replicable hereditary and all that kind of thing. So all good. I think this is really exciting. I think that's really cool. I think it'll diversify magic phases a lot more, which is interesting and nice, and that's what we like. It shakes things up, which is cool. Any other changes? No, don't think so. Flaming Aegis in the entire game. I think that's been said multiple times everywhere, but it's no longer 2+. It's been bounced to 3+. So no more running a Dragonfire gem into like the flaming demons that ID have and going, haha, you can't hurt me. Which, you know, shouldn't really have a place in the game, I think. So this is good, because I've certainly taken advantage of that before, and it felt rather cheesy. So good change there. All happy days. And then we can move on to the KoE stuff. Okay, on to KoE Alpha 4. So I'm actually recording this on the day that everyone else's videos have gone out. So I'm officially late, but I haven't missed any of the KoE updates yet. So I don't plan on starting now. And also, I like talking about them, and I like the sound of my own voice. So let's get started, shall we? So let's flick that off. There we go. And we'll start scrolling through and see what we can find, hey? So, first of all, big change, army-specific rules has orisons added into them, so it's no longer a model rule, it's now just an army rule, like the army has, everything has a 6+ Aegis at least. That's now where you can find the orisons, because you don't have to cast it from specific models anymore. You instead do it battlefield-wide, which sounds like a really big upgrade, and, you know, I mean, it is, but it's come with some caveats. So you have to cast it at the very start of a player turn, so that's for either friendly to player turn or an enemy player turn. You have to do that before any charges. So if you give the Orison of Striking to your, you know, Resplendent Knights that are going to make a charge on your turn, if you then fail that charge, you will have still spent one of your blessing tokens on that charge, and they have +1 to hit for the rest of that player turn, so it won't get used if they fail that charge. So that's where the nerf is coming from. That and the Orison of Shielding, which used to be Holy Shield, the unit gains Aegis 5+. That's important, and that will work with the tenets in a moment. We'll have a look at that in a moment. But it means that no longer you can no longer get rank and file models in Kingdom of Equitaine to a 4+ Aegis. So there's no more, I've got a 6+ Aegis on my Feudal Knights. You've ignored my armor save, so I get Courage, so I've got 5+, and I'm going to spend an Orison on the turn that you're on the phase that you're doing it for a 4+ Aegis. It's now you have to do it at the start of a turn. It's capped at 5+, and if you use it on a unit that then doesn't get to use the Orison, that's burnt. The blessing token has gone away. The other big change, or another of the big changes, because there are several here, is it's no longer per particular models that you've got in the army list. So it used to be Damsels, Sainted, Paladin, Reliquaries, and Clerics. I think that's all of them. They were the models that you take in the army list, and that gives you the number of blessing tokens or the Orison tokens that you take. Now it's simply 1 blessing token per 3,000 points that you've spent on the army, rounding fractions up. So 4,500 points, that's 1.5 tokens, you round that up. So every KoE army now starts with at least 2 tokens. That's changed again by a little bit of a rule that we see later on, but that's very rare. It's very nice and simple. If you take any clerics, if you take any reliquaries, you get an extra token. But again, we'll have a look at that at the moment. And finally, eagle-eyed among you will have seen that Holy Wrath hasn't been converted into Orison of Wrath or anything like that. It's now the Orison of Discipline, so there's no more causing fear with Orisons, and there's no more upgrading your fear to terror with Orisons, which is a nice simple change. That's probably good because it means that you can't hide terror in units and make it a little bit more complicated. I mean, you know, some Hippogriffs cause terror, some Phase Ds cause terror, some guys with Mortal Reminder can cause terror. in the old book. It's now the unit's discipline is set to 9, so that's a nice bonus, especially because it's army-wide, so if needs be, you can stick a reliquary and like 40 peasants out on a flank, and they can take care of themselves, because you can give them discipline 9 when they need it, and the reliquary gives them minimized discipline checks while they're in combat. You know, that's quite cool, that's nice, and that's nice for opponents as well, really. The blessing has had a little bit of a change. It's no longer the case where a fleeing KoE model can't pass its Aegis saves. That's gone. So that's, you know, a little bit of flavor, but it's, you know, it's in there, and it's a little bit like it's an extra thing to remember, and you might not remember it. So that's gone for the sake of simplicity, and I think that's nice for us, and I think that's fair. Fey Spirit isn't really needed, so that's gone. The things that need it have gained fearless and magical attacks. It also means that damsels, or well, any character on foot can join, you know, naiads, for example. So we'll take a look at that again in a moment. Gallantry has just had the little bit of a, by the way, if you take a 4,500 point army, you get 7 points of gallantry. That's taken off because, you know, we can do maths. We're big boys. Bannerets, I think, have had a really big buff with this. So the model can no longer, so in Alpha 3, with the line that's been cancelled there, you used to be able to issue a duel to a KoE unit, and if you refuse, then you can pick the banneret to not fight. So you could force a banneret to not fight, which means that they're not very good, or they weren't very good for things like questing knights and resplendents. If you charge into a character, the character can issue a duel. Your champion would say no because you want to hit them with the full unit, and then you wouldn't get to fight with the champion. So that's no longer a thing. It's now simply gain 1 hit point, gain +1 combat res, and the model can take a banner enchantment from this book. So much simpler, no more weird, almost sort of a character in some situations, so that's nice. Ordained is the thing that I was talking about earlier. So at step 7 of the pre-game sequence after spell selection, add 1 blessing token to your blessing token pool for each model with Ordained in your army list. So that's reliquaries and clerics. So it's a list building thing. The opponent doesn't really need to worry about it. You just ask your opponent how many you've got at the beginning, and they'll tell you. One thing that I did miss, because of, you know, the nature of these books having to go through like several different teams, things will get missed out in places. So the Orison of Shielding is a personal protection. The Orison of Striking is an attack attribute, so you can't use it with crush attacks. And the Orison of Discipline is a universal special rule. So that matters for like certain rules interactions, like crush attack, for example. That will be added into the final release day file. Next up, Auto Minister. So it feels like it's a nice long special rule, but all of that bit, that's all gone. That's gone. The 2 models per army, don't need to worry about that. That's a mistake. That needs to be gone as well. It's very simply now, at the start of each friendly magic phase, each unit containing 1 or more models with the Auto Minister may remove a single token from the blessing pool. If so, the unit or a model inside the unit may raise 1 health point. So you now don't get free healing in KoE, which is very, very good. It's very strange that, you know, one of the 2 human factions got free healing entirely without spending any resources or doing absolutely anything at all, could just bring guys back from the dead. That's no longer a thing, because undead can't do it. We certainly shouldn't be able to do it. So that's gone. You can spend a blessing token to do it if you've got an Auto Minister in the unit, or if the unit has Auto Minister. But it's no longer free. You have to spend a token on it. Next up, Prepared Position. So we'll recognise this from the dangerous terrains that upgraded lowborn archers can do. This is now where you can use your stakes from the Slim Book and the days of yore with your stakes from your Bretonnian archers, or bowmen, whatever they were. I don't know. I never played Warhammer. When deploying the unit, you may place a wall terrain feature with its centre within 2 inches of the unit, but not in contact with any other terrain feature except open terrain. This wall is up to 1 inch deep and up to 8 inches wide, and follows the rules for normal walls, with the exception that it contributes to soft cover instead of hard cover. So that's a nice little fun thing, I think. I think that's supposed to be limited, because you can take it on both lowborn archers and hooded men. I think that's supposed to be limited. So I imagine that will have been added to the final day file as well. That's quite cool. That's just like a nice little... It's good for peasants. I think it'll be very good with Scout on the Hooded Men, so I don't know how long it'll last on there, but, you know, it should be simpler to work with than, you know, how does dangerous terrain work on a unit that's just been charged. I mean, it's just the front rank. The front rank call takes a hit, but it's difficult to word that so that it's nice and easy to understand, so there we go. Sainted has gone through several steps of like reductions. It's not really lost an awful lot of power, but it should be much simpler to explain to opponents now. Orison is no longer a rule, so it's lost that. The offensive and defensive skill, its discipline setting to 9, and special item allowance has all been changed. So Orison's no longer a rule. The offensive and defensive change is now a game-wide guideline. That's why certain other armies will be losing stat changes, or it won't be quite so prevalent that you get stat changes like this. So it's supposed to be, you know, you can look at the model's profile and know what those rules do without having to look somewhere else in the book to find out what the offensive and defensive of this model is. So that in particular was a thing with folk heroes, which was quite complicated, because you'd start with 4, then the Castellan would set it to 5, then Sainted would add another one for 6, then if you had paired weapons, then it would go up to 7. If you went for supernatural dexterity, that's like another thing. So it's layers on layers on layers. So we've gotten rid of one of the layers here because it doesn't make an awful lot of difference really, because you come with the Orisons baked in still. So you're offensive of the model and you get +1 to hit. So the offensive and defensive skill, it's nice, but it's not crucial for the model at all. Discipline set to 9 is now one of the Orisons, so instead of causing fear or terror with the Sainted, it's now just discipline set to 9, so it's nothing for the Lords, but it makes a difference for the folk heroes and the damsels. And the special item allowance discrepancies, that has been moved to the model profiles, so it'll change for damsels, but it's on their profile instead of being written in Sainted, which makes more difference. But also, it's a list building thing, so you don't need to look at the rule. You don't need to have that on the rule. You can have that in the options in the book. So that's all fine. That's sensible. Next up is personal protections, which is the tenets. So courage, very nice and simple. It's no longer max 4+. It's just if you ignore your armor save, you get Aegis 5+. You can't combine that with Orisons at all because that's also giving you 5+ Aegis. So 2 lots of 5+ Aegis makes 5+ Aegis. So that's a nice, simple, easy change. It's not layers. Good change. Honesty is a mistake. It's like courage. You get Aegis 5+ against magical attacks. That against magical attacks shouldn't have been scratched out. That'll change for the final day file. Ordeal has gone back to Alpha 2 version, so, or maybe even Alpha 1. They gain Aegis 5+ while its unit is engaged in the same combat as at least one other friendly unit. This is slightly better than the old one, so you can now be so you can have 2 lots of Ordeal units, and because they're helping each other out, they get 5+ Aegis. You no longer need a separate unit with either courage or honesty. So it's nice and it's simpler to explain. You know, you can do it with Fey units, and you can do it with other peasant units, so that's a nice bonus. I'm going to miss the combat res. I think there were probably ways to do that instead. I think that's slightly more interesting than doing lots of Aegis, but this is at least nice and simple. It's a flat 5+ Aegis if you meet one of the 3 triggers, depending on what they are. It's either knights, it's peasants, and if it's not one of those 2, it's honesty. So that should be nice and easy to explain. Lance formation has a tiny bit of a change, but it's only really a clarification because extra support is now a rulebook rule, so we don't need the clause about the number of supporting attacks. You can just say, if it's standard, you gain extra support too, so that's nice and easy. It means it doesn't affect characters as well. Or more specifically, it doesn't mean that characters get 4 supporting attacks if you manage to force a lord into the 2nd rank. Or at least not with Pegasus. Anyway, yeah, that's why that's there. Mount support, very minor thing. Model part ignores harness for the purpose of support attacks. This is important for 1 unit, and we'll find that later on in the book. Bastard Sword has gone from a whole bloomin' paragraph down to a single sentence, and hand weapon. So, hand weapon, attacks made with the Bastard Sword gain +1 strength and devastating charge +1 AP. That's it. That's all of it. So you always get parry because it's always a hand weapon. It's never pretending to be a spear. You never get like weird interactions with weapon enchantments or anything anymore. It's just +1 strength, and on the charge you get +1 AP. And it's a hand weapon, so it works as a hand weapon. Nice and easy, nice and simple. Always works as parry. Always works as a hand weapon for weapon enchantments. I love this. This is great. Breath of the Lady has just had Orison changed to Blessing so that it matches the new Blessing and Orison's rules. Weapon enchantments, the points have changed a little bit. I'll go and, either you can pause and go and have a look at your own files, or we'll show off the thing at the very end. Magical attacks has been removed from all of these because it's now a rulebook rule that if you've got a weapon enchantment, you've got magical attacks. That's nice. Mortal Reminder has been buffed slightly. It's gone up 10 points, but also it causes terror as standard now. So this is one of our 2 terror causes, I think. And you get it just flat. Like the model gains +1 strength and AP, and fear and terror. So no hiding it behind an Orison token or anything. So that's cool. That's a nice change. Prayer Wretched and Percival's Panoply has gone up 5 points. 20 points. 10 points, final answer. 10 points for both of them. And the Fortress of Faith has clarified that you have to be using the shield. You could technically, in Alpha 3, buy a shield, then buy Fortress of Faith for the shield, and then use a great weapon. You could still get the rerolls of armor saves of 1. But you'd also have to be spending 55 points on a point of armor that you don't use, and you only get reroll 1s to armor save for there. That's fixed. Have to be using the shield, then you get your rerolls. Points wise here, that's gone up 5, that's gone up 5, that's gone up 10, that's gone down 5. Banners, no change to the banners at all. That's gone up 5, this has gone up 5, that's not changed. This has gone up 5, and that's gone down 5, but no changes to the actual rules there. Black Knight's Tabard hasn't actually changed, but it's just using a rulebook rule now, so instead of having to word it out itself, it's just immune multiple wounds. Nice and easy. It's also gone up 15 points because it's a crazy good item, which is, yeah, it's got to go up in points. It's mad. Sacred Chalice, Orison is no longer a special rule, so that's gone. So that's nice and easy. We'll see more of these now. I think this is a really cool magic item, so we'll see a lot more of this because you don't have to have the weird, either take it on a paladin or a damsel or a sainted or whatever now, or a cleric. So that's now for everybody, so you can put it on BSBs. I think that's a really good item for the BSBs, especially now that you can't take Mortal Reminder and Percival's Panoply. Next up, Damsel. The Damsel has gone down, I think, 5 points. Yes, gone down 5 points. It's lost Orison because Orison is no longer a special rule. Sainted has gone down 10 points for her, I think. If you Saint an Apprentice, then it gets the 200 points of special items. If you wanted to do that, I guess, if you wanted to try and make a combat one, for example. Whatever. The points here have shuffled around. We'll take a look at that at the end. Equitaine Lord, so the points here have shuffled around a little bit. I think that's gone up 5 points. You'll have to check. What's this? Have we gotten rid of Paladin? No. Take a look at that in a moment, but for now, let's take a look at the Lord changes. So, obviously, the Paladin options for the mounts are gone because Paladin doesn't exist in here anymore. The Sainted upgrade has gone down 10 points, which was personally quite surprising for me because it's more or less just as good as it used to be, but it's very, very frequently taken. Like it's by far the most frequent Sainted upgrade, so I was expecting this to go up, so I'm quite surprised by that, and I think we'll take that. The General can now take 200 points of magic items without being sainted, which is really cool. So you can now take a sainted something else and then make a general, and the general can have 200 points, which is a nice full allotment of magic items to fully kit out a guy, which I think is a cool change. Mount option points wise have all changed and fiddled around. Take a look at that one yourself. I'm not going through that for you. Valor has gone up 5 points. Excellence has gone up 5, maybe 10 points. Honor hasn't changed points wise, but it no longer gains a weird, finicky, devastating charge against the front rank. So you can't, there's no more turning sideways on to an honor thing just to make it a longer charge or anything like that. It's just the model rolls for charge range, it's subject to maximized roll, which is really cool. So, you know, he's going to be on a horse, you're not going to see him on foot, but that means 2 dice basic, 1 for his swift stride on a horse or a hippogriff or whatever, and then an extra 1 for maximized, which makes his average something about 9.5 or a 10, which is really cool, but it doesn't extend his range, it just makes his average higher, which is nice, and I think that's more easy for opponents to manage, so that's cool. For parents, got a bit of a buff, bit of a change. You can't go quite so damage heavy with him, but it's no longer finicky with, you know, you don't get distracting in the first round, but you have to be using a shield now, so I think that's good. I think it was cool that you had to wait until the second round of combat, because, you know, it's him like getting himself settled and organized to start taking hits and stuff, but now it's, you know, I suppose technically previously you could take like a great weapon and make him quite killy still, but that's not quite so much of an option anymore. As much. I suppose you could go a lance, but I suppose that's not really grindy, is it? So yes, when using the shield, model gains distracting. Nice and easy. Faith has changed a little bit, so we've got divine attacks here. So if you want to make a lord with divine attacks like you did with the old paladin, you can do that with this. And then the rest of it has stayed the same. Crucially, you have to be in combat when you are the target of an orison to gain the extra blessing token. So you can't have a unit that's about to charge, spend an orison on this character's unit, then charge them into combat, make it into combat, and then get a free token back or anything. It's got to be at the point where you're casting them onto the unit that you get the free tokens. So it only really works for multiple orison tokens if he's in a unit that's going to be grinding or is already in combat or whatever like that. So I think that's fair. I mean, you know, that's just a slightly odd interaction that we'll need to get used to, I suppose, after the last couple of updates of having it the old way, but I think that's sensible. We'll see if it's as good, but I think that's probably fine because Old Faith was really good and really cheap. So, and then finally, I think my favourite thing from this update, generosity has been completely and utterly changed. It's no longer a weird commanding presence. It's now the model gains attached rank and file. Go and check the rulebook for that, and we've explained this earlier on in the video. Rank and file models with courage in the unit that the model is deployed in gain Bastard Sword and Weapon Master until the end of the game. So that's quite cool. You get to try out the new Bastard Sword, and you can put that in Feudal Knight, you can put that in Pegasus, you can put that in Resplendence. You could give Questing Knights Weapon Master if you really wanted to go for a hand weapon. Don't know why you would, but you can. And Hedge Knights. We don't have any light troops mounts, but you could sit them in Hedge Knights and give them Bastard Swords and Weapon Master, so they'd still not count as having any ranks, and they'd have to use normal cavalry movement, like forwards and backwards and dressage sideways and all that kind of thing, but you could if you wanted to. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think that's really fun. I think it'll be a nice thing for a BSB. We'll see how it does. I'm excited to try it out, at least. There's the Paladin. So it's now its entirely separate thing. Instead of layering a Lord with Paladin and Sainted and a Virtue, or a Principle rather, it's now its own thing. Paladins can't take Principles, but they get their own special rule called Righteous Smite. Fail to wound rolls at close combat attacks against which the target has a special save must be re-rolled. So if you hit something with Aegis 6+, you get re-rolls to wound. If you've got divine attacks and they've got an Aegis, you still get re-rolls to wound because they've got a special save. If they've got Fortitude and you hit them with something with flaming, they don't have a special save, so you won't get re-rolls to wound. But I think that's pretty cool. I think Shield Breaker works really well on this. Just hit something and go, well, do you have a special save? If you do, if you've got a save against me, I get to re-roll a wound against you. If you don't have a special save, well, it doesn't matter, I've got a Shield Breaker, so you haven't got a save at all. Which I think is nice. I think that's fun. I think that's cool. I think that's a cool interaction. I think that's probably the best build for him, maybe. I guess Cleansing Light is quite a good one as well, because, you know, it's very good anti-demon stuff, anti-ghost stuff in VC as well. I think that's cool. I think it's nice having it a separate entry as well. It just means that you can, you know, it's nicer for an opponent to look at it, and it's nice to, it's not layers and layers and layers of, like, you know, Principled and Paladin upgrades, Sainted upgrades, so that's quite cool. I think that's quite fun. Next up, Folk hero, so its offensive and defensive have been set to 5. It's no longer a Castellan thing. The points have changed, blah blah, whatever. Sainted, you get an extra 50 points if you're paying that. The Bastard Sword is no longer in the Castellan either. You can pay for it and buy it. You can also give a Castellan a proper lance. You can give a big stick instead of a little stick. That's very exciting, isn't it? I think that's a cool change. Nothing else really there to the actual entry. But the Cleric has changed. Obviously, Orison 1 isn't a thing anymore. This is one of the ordained models, so if you take a Cleric, you'll get an extra blessing token at the start of the game. And it's got, you know, the new version of Ordo Minister, which is what it had anyway. Castellan is really simple now. Castellan just gives +2 attacks. The rest of it, I think, you know, Castellan's changed in points. Minstrel's gone down slightly. That's everything that we're going to see there. Okay, so the rest of the book should be nice and simple now. The Heraldic Steed. So these Heraldic Steeds have lost their impact hits, but they've gained mount support, extra support 3, and +2 attack. And I think, because this and the unit are different, I think this is the correct one. So on the charge, a Heraldic Steed will have 3 attacks that it can make from the 2nd rank, despite it being harnessed, which is quite cool. So a unit of 6 Heraldic Steeds, you know, just from the mounts alone, you get 18 strength, 4 AP1 attacks. That's without the guys on top, and they get to attack in ranks as well, like the supporting attacks. So that's quite a change. It's really good for like taking bigger units of these, which is cool because I don't think we've seen much, if any, of these guys. So that's really nice. The unicorn has been changed a little bit. We're trying to make it a little bit more attractive for cowboys, so it's got slightly faster and it's got Strider. But otherwise than that, it's not changed at all. It still gives its models unit magical attacks and Forest Strider. Pegasus is the same. Hippogriff is the same. Phase Steed has been changed a little bit. It should have magical attacks on there, I believe. It's lost Phase Spirit, so that's why it's gained magical attacks. And it's gained Fearless that way as well. Feudal Knights have, you know, the points have changed a little bit. Ordo Ministers have gained an extra point of armor. So now with a great weapon, you'll always have a 3-up save. And if you use a Light Lance, then you have a 2+ save because you buy a shield with your Light Lance. It's nice, makes them a little bit more grindy, which I think is what we want them to be doing. Because I think they were a little bit soft otherwise. I think Feudals were just better at grinding than they were. So this is cool, and we'll see how that gets on. Obviously, Ordo Minister as a champion upgrade is no longer a thing. It's a unit special rule, so you no longer have to buy an expensive champion to get the healing, but you do have to spend the tokens to get the healing. And Orison is no longer a rule, so bin that. Lowborn levies have changed. You know, it's more expensive to use shields because parry's really good on them. So I think at this price point, I think we might start to get to see other models, which is nice because I think spears and halberds and, you know, even paired weapons potentially. We'll see. It's certainly very cheap to take them, and I think the Orison of Discipline is a big buff for them as well because, you know, when do you need fear on peasants? But I think Discipline 9 on them being off by themselves, you know, accidentally leaving them outside of general range or to a terror check or whatever, that's a nice change. I think that's good for them. Lowborn archers, so these guys have lost their accurate because, you know, I think it felt odd, at least to some armies, that our lowly peasants were shooting almost as accurately as elves in certain situations. You know, the elf can move around and shoot at 4+, you know, all that kind of thing, but it's different now. So instead of expert longbowmen, it's now archery drills. The model can shoot from 3rd and 4th rank if it did not move this player turn and it has at least 1 full rank. So this doesn't make an awful lot of difference to the unit as a base unit. It just means that you can have narrower units that shoot deeper. So if you have a unit of 20 guys, you can deploy them 5 by 4, and they all get to shoot because you've got at least 1 full rank. So you get to shoot first 2 basic and the next 2 because of archery drills. So that makes them a little bit easier to deploy in and around and beside lances and stuff. Volley fire kind of fixes that anyway, but it means that you don't have to deploy your archers off to one side anymore. Additionally, prepared position is in here as an option for them to take, so you can take walls for that. Special, so Men-at-Arms have changed a little bit. The shield has been moved to the profile. Obviously, Orison is no longer a special rule and no longer is an auto minister, so those have been binned. There's not an option for men-at-arms for auto wardens to have auto minister, which is fine. The avowed armsmen, the peasant version of men-at-arms, have gained spears instead of paired weapons. I think this is really cool, and it works really, really well in combination with stalwart defense. So that's cool. I think, you know, looking forward to seeing lots of big bricks of men-at-arms running around. Again, the points have changed a little bit. Don't know by how much. We'll check at the end. So the Sacred Reliquary is, you know, gained, attached, and exclusive rank and file infantry. So check the rulebook for that. Again, we did that earlier on in the video. If you want to go and take a look at that, that's exactly the same as it used to be. Has to be deployed in a unit. Can't leave that unit. Orison, again, say it with me now. It's no longer a special rule, so it's been binned. The Sacred Reliquary is also ordained, so if you take any of these, it'll give you extra blessing tokens. And additionally, its Aegis has gotten slightly better because it kind of was quite soft in combat. So you run into it, you kill the Reliquary, and then it's suddenly easier to chase off all the, you know, yucky, smelly peasants. So that's been changed to try and fix that. It obviously doesn't gain any bonus from Orisons or Honesty anymore, but you know, it's got 5+ Aegis all the time, so hopefully that's better. Interestingly, this works the same way as Faith, so if you're charging into combat, you won't be able to get your free Orison from the Reliquary doing its Reliquary Sacred Relic thing. You have to be already engaged in combat to get the free one. Which again, this is fine. I think that, you know, way of doing things was really very powerful, so I think this is a sensible knockback, and we can add to it again if it's not powerful enough. It's also gone up considerably in points because, you know, again, it's very, very good. Knights Resplendent have their points changed a little bit. Penitents have gained courage because it was weird that we had a knight unit without courage. So that's nice and easy for opponents now. It's no longer, you know, all my knights have courage but penitents. It's now just all knights have courage, which is cool. They've also lost a point of armor and they haven't gained it in the way of a shield or anything. So these guys are always now just a 3-up armor save. So they should be slightly easier to grind through for opponents, which very sad for me. I adore my penitent knights, but they were really very brutal, and I've seen them take on all sorts of things that they probably shouldn't have been able to take on. So this is fair. That's sensible. We can also wave goodbye to the Strength 5 horses. Strength 5 horses were nice. Maybe they weren't sensible. You'd only ever generally be getting like 3, maybe 5 attacks from them, and they're only offensive 3, and they're only AP 1. But they were sort of strength 5, weren't they? So that's the same as, you know, Minotaurs and Veldrax and Karkadans, Trolls, and that's from a regular horse. So maybe strength 4 AP 0 is more sensible. Additionally, Orison 0 and Auto Minister are no longer champion and special rules, so they have been binned. That means no more free healing on the penitents either. Again, that's probably fine and sensible. Whether this unit is going to be worth its price point anymore, I don't know. I think this unit is probably still very good, but it will be now a lot more reliant on making sure that you give them particular magical support. You can't just let them, you know, fight whatever and beat it. They've got to be supported by magic, which is probably fine. They've kept their banner enchantment as well, so you can kind of protect them with a banner of Roland if you want to do that. And, you know, MR potentially as well, all that kind of thing, etc. and so on. Knights of the Quest. So, because the Rending Banner has been removed from the Arcane Compendium, these guys haven't had any other kind of buff because they, I mean, you know, Knights of the Quest kind of sort of, you know, at least part of the reason why the Rending Banner is gone, because you end up with units with deliberately low AP from a design perspective that then take a Rending Banner to make them more universal than they've been designed to do. So we've upped the points considerably for extra models, not at all for the base unit, and the rest of the rules haven't been touched at all, and we're going to see how these guys get on without a Rending Banner. Interestingly, even though the extra models have gone up 15 points a model, if you're only taking 3 extra guys for a unit of 9, which is generally what you would do anyway, that's only an extra 45 points for the unit. And because you've lost the Rending Banner that we know that you're all taking, it's gone down 5 points for this unit. You've lost a Rending Banner, but, I mean, the points haven't changed at the very least, so it doesn't change your list at all, this change. It just, you know, should bring them more into line with what they should be doing, rather than the crazy, all-defeating gods that they were beforehand. So, we'll see how they get on. Hedge Knights have finally had a cool change. I think this is going to be a really sweet spot for them. I think the points are quite low for them at the moment. So we'll see how long they survive at this point price, but I think the rule set, points aside, is really good. The choice, like, they don't have Weapon Master, so when you choose between your Light Lance and paired weapons, you are going to be stuck like that. But I think that the chance for this extra strength and AP on the charge, along with the Battle Focus Frenzy, Hatred, and Fearless, is really good for them. And with the paired weapons, they can also receive charges if you take like a small unit of 6 and just have them 6 wide. That's, what, 18 strength 4 from the Knights, and then another 6 from the horses, which have been upgraded. They're now a strength 4 horse. So happily now, all courage units, all courage rank and file units now have the same offensive stat line for the horse. They're all called something different, but they all have the same offensive stat line. It's all 1 attack, offensive 3, strength 4, AP nothing, agility 3. So that again should be nice and simpler for the opponent. So yeah, excited to see lots of Hedge Knights around. Yeoman Outriders haven't changed. It's gotten cheaper to take big units because, you know, when would you ever take more than 5? Hooded Men, Enlisted Outlaws has become a lot more simple. You lose Daring and Unstable, you get Hard Target and Skirmisher. That's cool. That's fine. We don't need to worry about the terrain feature anymore. They've got access to Prepared Position, so yes, this isn't limited anywhere in this book. So I think this is supposed to be 0 to 3. I don't think it's supposed to be that you can take 3 Lowborn Archer units and 2 Hooded Men and then deploy 5 walls. I don't think we're supposed to be building castles here. I think that's a mistake. We should be capped at like 2 or 3, I think, but we'll check. Additionally, you can take crossbows on this unit now. They don't have quick to fire or anything, but, you know, crossbow with aim 3+ is quite cool. You know, on light troops as well, makes it a little bit more flexible to use. Yeah, quite expensive, but, you know, options are nice. Siege weapon, so the catapult has changed to 4x4. It's not gained a big hit still, but that is very specifically because we do not want to design something similar to the Slim book, where it then gets priced at like 250 points a model for one of them, where so that you're taking 2 of them is like a 1/9 of your list. That isn't what KoE should be about at all. Our war machines shouldn't be crazy good and like flexible like the old Slim book ones were, because it makes it frustrating to price at a point where it's nice to take them that doesn't just bend to the rest of the list building. So that's why it's stayed at strength 4 AP 1, and it's been changed to 4x4 because it's slightly nicer for opponents, it's slightly nicer for us. It means that you don't catch a person out occasionally. I have managed to do that once. I landed a full hit from a trebuchet in the flank of a Barrow Guard unit that was exactly 3x8, so I got the full 24 hits and killed like 16 of them. It was very grim. So that's sensible. I think the points may be slightly too high, maybe 170 for only 16 hits, but I mean, you know, the number of times that you'd actually get those full 24, very rare. So I think that's fine. Scorpions have actually changed. We'll see this in the full final release thing. It's lost its multiple wounds D3+1. It's now just multiple wounds D3 clipped wings, which is fine. I mean, you know, this is currently as good as a cannon, but better with AP, and also it can't misfire, so whatever, that's fine. Scorpions are still incredibly good. Don't worry about it. Pegasus Knights, I think, have gone down 10 points for the base unit, but that is because they have lost a point of armor. So these guys are now a 3-up armor. They've kept their Aegis. You can put Banner of Roland on them and all that kind of thing. But they're still 3 hit points. They're still March 16 with Fly. They're still Res 4. They've still got a 3-up, 6-up, so they're still incredibly tough to kill. They're just not, you know, ridiculously heavy armored knights. So whether that will hit the unit too hard, don't know. Haven't really used Pegasus Knights. I think other things in the book are slightly better and easier to use and tougher and suit my playstyle better, so that's why I've not been using them. But I think this is probably fair, really. We probably shouldn't have large cavalry that flies around with the same armor save as, like, you know, a Chosen Knight. Next up is the Sky Herald. So, as I said earlier, the offensive has gone up slightly for Heraldic Steeds. It's got slightly more expensive for extra models, but that's because you can now, you get 1 from the rider, or 2 if you've gone paired weapons, and then 3 from the mount, and they get to support attack with the mount as well, which is nice. I think that's cool. I think we'll certainly, with the change to Pegasus Knights, that makes these two a lot more close in competitiveness. You take these guys for strength and AP, and I guess stomps if you want stomps, and courage if you're specifically looking for courage. But otherwise, these guys are a big competitor for Pegasus Knights now. On to Fae. So the Fae section was adding an awful lot of complexity to the book as a whole, just because of how different it was to the rest of it. Because we've added essentially nice demons to the book. Nice supernals. I mean. So they come with lots of extra special rules about how they deploy, how they attack, and how they act. That's just different to how humans act. So we've been cutting away at this to try and keep it as close to the concept without expanding it massively with bloated special rules like this. So water spirits is now gone for treating water as soft cover and like a forest, and you can scout into it and blah blah blah. It's just been replaced with some rulebook rules, which makes an awful lot more sense. Fearless because it's lost Fey Spirit. Scout because it had Scout but weird Scout. Strider Water Terrain because it had Strider Water Terrain but it was hidden in another rule. Special Ambush, which is a new rule for the rulebook, so you can ambush out of water terrain if you fancy. And then Fey Spirit and Water Spirits is gone, as I've said. It hasn't lost magical attacks because you can't have grind attacks with magical, so that's not really a change there. And then Healing Waters has just been relisted as a change because Healing Waters has changed. Oh, and they've also gone up 2 points for extra models. This one's a little bit of a weird one because you always see it in combat units, but the Wizard Conclave just is non-existent almost. So getting the right price point here is something that's being worked on. We'll see more of this in the future. Friar's Lanterns. So let's see. This bit of the rule is going to be disappearing from your version of the book. That's because it's got Fearless, Feigned Flight, Illusions to say that it can flee and must always flee despite having Fearless. Skirmisher for purposes of line of sight. It no longer blocks line of sight despite being a single model. Ghost Step, because it shouldn't be taking dangerous terrain. It's a bunch of lights. It lost Fey Spirit because it's got Fey Spirit isn't a rule. You can't magical attack with grind attacks, so it's gained Fearless. It's lost Fey Spirit. And then finally, I think this has been a little bit simpler. So it's now just -2 advance, -2 march. Same triggers, but it no longer affects the pursuit distance, which is cool because how often would that come into effect? You'd need to be in combat with them and then lose combat with everything, and then they'd have to, a lot more hard to pull off, a lot more hard to exactly work out precisely what it means. So that's gone. It's not needed. Shouldn't be using your Friar's Lanterns like that anyway. And it's also gone down a little bit in points. So more rulebook rules, less nonsense from the specific lab. It's nice and easier to use. Looking forward to trying these guys out again. The Lady Courtier. So all the extra fluff about the extra bonuses. So the fighty version no longer gives extra maximized charge distances, and the Courtier of the Dusk no longer reduces the casting values of friendly spells cast at either herself or any model in the same combat is gone. They've stayed otherwise the same. The base version has gone up 5 points. The big version has gone up, maybe stayed the same. But the big thing here is it's got magical attacks from Supernal, it's gained Fearless from losing Phase Spirit, and the movement has gone down. So it's no longer move 8, march 16, it's now just 6 and 12, which should be a lot more reasonable. Should make it a little bit more awkward to use because it can't quite as easily keep up with the rest of your single models and your lancers if you're moving at full pelt. Obviously it's a single model, so it's still quite maneuverable, but this should be nicer and simpler and better for opponents, and it's still really good. We'll see how that gets on. And the final change in the book, Bound to Land, this is basically exactly what Special Ambush is, but now it's written as Special Ambush, and it's slightly better as Special Ambush, and it's specifically water terrain or forest, so rulebook rule, better than a lab rule, which is good. It's gone down a little bit in points, it's gained Fearless, and it should have gained magical attacks. Oh no, sorry, it has magical attacks from Supernal, so it's lost Phase Spirit because we don't need Phase Spirit, we just need Fearless, we've added that. And then other than that, the Warden of the Hooded Man has been toned down because that was the one that was dominating this entry. It's no longer large and gigantic for multiple wounds, it's just Towering Presence. So gigantic, and then the weird like large models like Hippogriffs and Imperial Griffins and stuff like that. So that's cool, and that's also our other Terror Causer. Additionally, Champion of the Green Knight. Champion of the Green Knight is no longer, while fighting a duel to gain the 4+ Aegis, it's just a 4+ Aegis against combat attacks, so this makes this a little bit better and should maybe see a little bit more of this. And then points of, wiggled around and all that kind of thing. And that's the whole lot. So, thank you very much for joining me. I think this is quite a long one, so well done if you did make it all the way to the end. Even more well done if you haven't just paused on the screens to have a look at the rules and stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Let's have a quick cheeky scroll down to the points, shall we? There we go. That's what you've all been waiting for, isn't it? Is that all of them? Yeah, that's all of them. So that's the second half, and that's the first half. Lovely stuff. Thanks for joining me. Bye.